With today being Veterans Day across the nation, people are honoring those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. It always falls on November 11th, but do you know the history behind the day? Let's connect the dots.
We're breaking down the origins of Veterans Day. Let's connect the dots. Veterans Day originally came out of World War I, but it didn't become an official holiday until years later. 116,000 American soldiers died in that war. It was a number never seen in the world before. So World War I officially ended when the U.S. and Germany agreed to a ceasefire. This was on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. A year later, President Woodrow Wilson declared November 11th as Armistice Day. It was to remember the sacrifices of those who served. Then in 1926, Congress made a formal declaration calling for a celebration of peace, although it was early because the Second World War started just 13 years later. And then in 1954, President Eisenhower changed the holiday to Veterans Day, this time to recognize all who served. And a reminder, the day pays tribute to all American veterans, living or dead. Memorial Day in May honors those who died in service to their country. And that's connecting the dots.
And while lots of people know Veterans Day and what the purpose of the holidays is, some are worried that the recognition of Veterans Day is starting to fade and that some people may just see it as a day off. Sunday, the Guilford County Veterans Memorial held an observance to honor those who fought for our country. And one of the speakers talked about the need to continue honoring veterans and their stories. We talked to that speaker afterwards and a member of the ROTC at North Carolina A&T about the importance of recognizing veterans.
The issue is that veterans generally are very private about their story, right? They generally, this is something, I was just doing my job. And so we run the risk of losing that story, the story of humanity and courage and selfless service and honor and duty and all these things. We run the risk of losing that as veterans go and like, well, that was just par for the course. It's not anything special, when in fact it is incredibly special.
There's a large veteran population in Guilford County, but the representation was low. So knowing that we are here to support them, we are here to at least acknowledge that the efforts that they've made are valued within the community, within the country. Veterans choose sometimes not to share their stories. I feel like it's important to pass down that information to upcoming generations so we know where we're headed, where we're coming from. We can learn from those stories.
And around the Triad, there are plenty of different ways to honor our veterans and hear their stories. One option is at the Greensboro History Museum. And while there's plenty of other stories, there's also snippets about our veterans. This weekend, they held a history hunt, letting community members explore galleries and discover veterans' stories. With Veterans Day, there's always a parade. On Saturday, Greensboro held theirs, honoring local Gold Star families, representing those from all United States Armed Forces. And there's also a different field of honors across the Triad. Here's a look at one in Asheboro that's set up today. And in Kernersville, there's the Carolina Field of Honor. And on the West Coast, one woman has used the grief of losing her husband in combat to help others honor the service and sacrifice of the American military. Here's her story.
He was the person who saw me in ways nobody else did, and I think that's the power of love.
When Lisa Hallett's husband, Captain John Hallett, was killed by an IED in Afghanistan in 2009, she leaned on the thing that kept her going during her years as a military spouse.
Running was always a way for me to parallel the challenges John's faced in military service with a challenge of my own.
At the time of his death, Lisa and John had 3 children under the age of 3. Their youngest never met John. She was just weeks old.
I could go and run and feel all of the big feelings that I needed to, and then come home and be that mom that my children needed and deserved for me to be.
Running in community supported Lisa as she navigated and worked through her grief and loss. To help others, Lisa and a fellow Army wife started Wear Blue Run to Remember in 2010. Nearly 15 years later, through community runs and mentorship, the organization has helped thousands across the country heal from the devastating loss of a military loved one.
It really is about bringing like-minded individuals so that they can connect over their shared experiences, their shared losses.
This year, to remember John and raise money for families of fallen soldiers, Lisa ran the 150K long Wonderland Trail around Mount Rainier. Hallett, who lives in Washington State, says it was a natural choice to honor John.
Here's this beautiful precipice in our backyard that really encompasses all the things I wanted John to know: beauty, hard work, achievement.
She says doing hard things has allowed her to confront her grief and take the steps to move forward. Now she and others run for the fallen, the fighting, and their families. Danya Backus, CBS News, Los Angeles.
And as you can tell, there's plenty of stories from veterans across our country. And on WFMY Plus, we currently have a Veterans Day special exploring stories from North Carolina veterans and heroes who have served our country. You can download WFMY Plus on Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, or Apple TV.